Our minds live in a state of exhaustion. Bombarded by information, crushed by anxiety, and constantly forced to multitask, they have become fragile and vulnerable to collapse. However, if we look at ancient records and the wisdom of the Bible, we realize that mental strength, it wasn't a gift, it was a cultivated discipline. The secret wasn't in intelligence but in routine. What the wise men of Israel knew, and what neuroscience confirms today, is that an unbeatable mind is not born, it is made, shaped by age-old habits. They lived under real threats, in environments of scarcity and uncertainty, but maintained a peace and focus that seem unattainable in our age of comfort. The answer to their anxiety lies in the resilience habits they practiced daily. Today we will introduce the concept of discipline of wisdom. This is the practice of aligning the mind with eternal principles, making it immune to external chaos. It's not about mysticism or empty self-help, but rather about commandments and routines that were the foundation of the faith of prophets and kings. They understood that the most dangerous battlefield is always the one between your two ears. Therefore, this is not just a list, it is a mental construction map. You will learn how the ancients trained their brains for patience, focus, and gratitude, transforming fear into reverence and uncertainty into faith. This wisdom is the fence you need to protect your mental vineyard from being stolen by anxiety and disorder. In this video, you will discover the 7 habits of wisdom that make your mind unbeatable. Let's unravel the practice behind Shabbat, meditation, and confession, applying these ancient rules directly to your daily life. In the end, your mind will have the necessary foundation to withstand any storm. For the mindset of ancient Israel, life was a succession of uncertainties. Living under the threat of invaders, disease, and famine made life, mental strength. It was a survival requirement, far more so than physical strength. Their resilience was the ability to maintain faith and inner order, even when the outside world crumbled. In the Bible, a weak mind is often associated with a restless heart or to a divided soul. We see the contrast in figures like Rehoboam, who listened to the advice of inexperienced young men and lost the kingdom, unsteady heart, and Daniel, who maintained his routine of prayer under penalty of death, strong mind. Daily discipline was the wall that protected stability. In this context, wisdom was seen as a daily discipline, and not a gift that fell from the sky. The wise understood that the man who prospers is the one who meditates on the law day and night, Psalm 1, that is, who exercises his mind from the beginning. This continuous exercise was the forge where the mind became unbeatable against fear and pressure. The curious thing is that today, although most of us live in physical safety, the psychological pressure. The problem is greater due to information overload and social comparison. The mind is bombarded with more anxiety than ever before in the desert. This makes the habits of the ancients who trained their focus in the discarding of worries more urgent than ever. Therefore, to achieve the peace of the wise, we need to abandon passivity. The mind does not strengthen itself. It requires you to actively implement these strategies, methods. Habits of wisdom, transforming faith into a muscular practice that shields the soul against the chaos and disorder of the modern world. Habit 1. The power of silent contemplation, biblical meditation. The first habit is silent contemplation or biblical meditation. The Hebrew term for meditate, haga, the word literally means to murmur or to think quietly. It is not emptying the mind, as in Eastern practices. It is the opposite. To fill the mind with God's law and principles. It's an exercise in intentional focus. The psalmists practiced this constantly. They murmured God's promises, deeds, and rules of the Torah to force their minds to focus on the truth, not the circumstances. This act of conscious repetition acted as a spiritual filter, blocking out the noise of worries and negativity that tried to invade one's thoughts. The practical application of this habit is silence as a weapon against digital overstimulation. In ancient times, the enemy was hunger. Today, it is notification. The mind only becomes unbeatable when it learns to control its focus. Biblical meditation forces you to sit, quiet yourself, and direct all your mental energy toward the eternal. The main benefit of this habit is increased inner peace, shalom. When the mind is saturated with the Word, it becomes predictable and coherent. Decisions are not made on impulse or in panic, but on the solid foundation of the truth you have internalized. The wise person is not the one who knows the most, but the one who uses what they know best. To develop this habit, set aside some time each day where you don't consume information, but rather repeats a promise from God. This trains your mind to shift away from worries and realign itself with the Creator's authority, making it increasingly unshakable. Habit 2, the practice of controlled expectation, faith versus anxiety. The second habit is practice of controlled expectation. This is the difference between waiting on God, faith, and living in anxiety, uncontrolled expectation. The unbeatable mind is trained to only worry about today because he knows that the future belongs to God. Jesus taught this directly in Matthew 6 when he condemned anxiety about clothes and food. He asked, "Which of you by worrying can add a single hour to your life?" Anxiety produces no results. It depletes mental energy, which could be used for today's work. Worrying about tomorrow is a theft of energy from the present. Historical curiosity is the manna in the desert. God provided daily provisions and forbade the people from storing up food for the next day. This rule was not merely economic, it was a forced mental discipline. She trained people's minds to trust in God's faithfulness with each new dawn, preventing scarcity from becoming a pattern of thought. A weak mind projects catastrophic future scenarios, living in the what if. A strong mind uses wisdom. It plans, but don't worry. She trains herself to discard alarmist thoughts about the future, focusing only on present responsibilities. This frees up a tremendous amount of mental power that would otherwise be wasted on panic. The modern application is, start the day by surrendering the future to God. If an anxious thought about tomorrow tries to creep in, practice immediate exchange for worrying about the promise. This discipline of discarding negative scenarios is what shields the mind against emotional exhaustion. Habit 3, the daily word filter, reading discipline. The third habit is to use the daily word as a filter. The unbeatable mind has an absolute yardstick for judging the veracity of every thought, of every piece of information received. The filter of the word decides what can or cannot enter, and what should be discarded as mental garbage. The basis for this is Hebrews 4:12, which says that the Word of God is living and active, and able to discern the thoughts and intentions of the heart. The filter isn't in you, it's in the Word. It works like a metal detector, revealing what is valuable and what is scrap metal in your mind. The historical context shows that the king of Israel, he was required to have a personal copy of the law to read daily, Deuteronomy 17:18-19. This command was not merely religious, it was a governance discipline. The king who did not read the law was governed by his own ego and impulses. Daily reading protects the mind from error. Modern wisdom dictates that we live in informational Tower of Babel from the internet. Our minds are constantly being invaded by opinions, skepticism, and misinformation. The Bible is the only antidote what you have against this confusion. It is the unchanging pattern that makes your mind coherent and strong against external instability. The application is a discard exercise. If a thought of despair or injustice contradicts the character of God as revealed in the Bible, you discard it immediately, without debate. This discipline of not negotiating with doubt based on the Word is what makes your mind invincible and unshakable. Habit 4. The discipline of limited focus, the James Principle. The fourth habit is discipline of limited focus. A weak mind tries to embrace the world and do many things at once. A strong mind knows that multitasking, or double-mindedness, is what most depletes mental and spiritual strength. James 1:8 warns against the man of double spirit, which is fickle in all its ways. The term double-minded means having a divided soul, trying to please two masters or follow two paths at the same time. This destroys focus and stability. Ancient Jewish thinking focused on Torah, way. Life was seen as a single path. Inconstancy was condemned because it hindered progress and peace. They understood that the mind must be trained for objectivity, that is, to aim at a single target. The interesting thing is that what we call multitasking today is in fact a quick focus switching which demands extra energy from the brain. This exhaustion makes the mind feel weak and disorganized. The unbeatable mind, on the other hand, imitates the action of God, objective, intentional, and targeted. The application is simple. Eliminate multitasking. Train your mind to focus on one task at a time, whether it's prayer, work, or rest. This discipline of focusing on the present on a single purpose restores your mental energy and the clarity of your decisions. Habit 5. The habit of active gratitude, cultivating joy. The fifth habit is active gratitude. For the invincible mind, gratitude is not a feeling that arises after a blessing. It is proactive decision which acts as a shield against resentment and envy. Psalm 103, which invites us to bless the Lord and not forget any of his benefits, is an exercise in mental recount. It forces the mind to actively seek what has already been received, instead of focusing on the scarcity of the present. This reorients the brain toward God's sufficiency. The historical context shows that sacrifices of praise in the temple, people were proactive. They gave thanks for the blessing before receiving it, which was an act of faith and mental discipline. Giving thanks trained the brain to seek the positive amidst chaos and waiting, strengthening hope. A weak mind focuses on what is lacking, compares itself to others, and generates envy and resentment. A strong mind uses gratitude as shield. She opposes this comparison. She acknowledges what she has and rests in God's faithfulness, cutting off the root of bitterness. The application is, start and end your day by actively listing 3 to 5 things you are grateful for. This practice is what shields your mind against the virus of chronic dissatisfaction that dominates modern culture. Habit 6. The strategic use of rest. The Sabbath Principle. The sixth habit is strategic use of rest, summarized in the principle of the Sabbath. Rest is not an optional luxury. It is a commandment for mental and spiritual protection. It is essential for maintaining an unbeatable mind. The historical context of the Sabbath, Shabbat, is that Israel paused every 7 days so that the mind could to realign with the Creator. Rest prevented people from falling into the arrogance of thinking that life, provision, and success depended solely on human effort. The theological lesson is that rest is a sign of trust. A strong mind knows that the source of power is not your performance. It is the faithfulness of God. The weak mind is addicted to work and movement, for it fears that if it stops, the world will crumble. The Sabbath forces the mind to relinquish control. The modern application is to define work and cell phone boundaries. It's a spiritual discipline, not just a physical one. You need blocks of time where your mind is free from demands and worries, so that it can renew itself and hear God's voice. The unbeatable mind is the one that knows that stopping and resting is, in fact, the most productive act of the week, as it restores clarity and strength for the next 6 days. Habit 7. The habit of confession and correction, the antidote to the ego. The seventh habit is confession and correction, which is the practice of radical humility. The unbeatable mind is the one that has the ability to admit mistakes and seek to correct them, because he knows that pride is the greatest weakness. The biblical context of confession wasn't just about asking God for forgiveness. It was an act of mental clarity, which cleared the field of spiritual vision. Confessing the error meant ceasing to live under the lie of self-deception, which burdens the mind with the weight of secrecy and perfection. The risk is that the pride and ego, they try to hide their mistakes, forcing the mind to maintain a facade of perfection that is unsustainable. The proud mind is always at war, defending its errors. The invincible mind seeks the light and correction immediately. The modern application is that talk about weaknesses. It's the most powerful act there is, because it breaks the vicious cycle of self-deception and shame. You need wise friends to whom you can confess, which relieves the mental burden and restores your sanity. The result is that the mind becomes trainable, adaptable, and free from the weight of perfection. You become strong because you are no longer fighting against the truth about yourself. but accepting the correction that comes from the Word and the Holy Spirit. An unbeatable mind is not a miracle, but the direct result of discipline of 7 ancient habits. You don't need to be perfect, but you need to be intentional. We have seen that mental strength is built on contemplation, controlled expectation, the filter of the Word, limited focus, active gratitude, strategic rest, and humble confession. Ancient wisdom held that a weak mind seeks shortcuts and succumbs to anxiety. An invincible mind builds walls with these habits. The ultimate secret is that strength does not reside in your human capacity, but in your ability to align with the power source of God. Your mind is ready for the next phase of your purpose. Start applying these habits today. Don't let modern chaos steal the peace that was bought for you. Controlling your mind is your greatest responsibility. If you found this content helpful, please follow the channel. Here we explain the Bible with historical depth applied to real life, in a way that transforms understanding and wisdom. Click on follow and continue on this journey. The Bible is ancient, but its answers remain alive, and if you learn to listen to it, you will see life with a clarity that few possess.